Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Dream, and you are here for the It's All Good show. My guest today, I actually met, well, now we realize we met in passing a couple of years ago in Dallas, which is fascinating in and of itself, but we officially met on a Zoom event call not so long ago, and I was so impressed with him in the Zoom call. I said, I've got to interview you. And so let me just jump right in. I just got done telling him, I said, normally I have my guests introduce themselves, but you are so fascinating and there's so much really incredible aspects to who you are. I'm not going to let you introduce yourself. I'm going to introduce you because I want all this information packed in there. So it's a lot. I don't want to get it wrong. So I'm actually going to read it off this list. Um, I'm joined today by someone who's not only a deeply knowledgeable health practitioner, but also a true integrative thinker. Someone who sees the human experience as a tapestry of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. Roland Pankewich is a personalized health practitioner who has cultivated a powerful framework for holistic care informed by his extensive background in exercise mechanics, clinical nutrition, functional medicine, bioenergetic medicine, and psychospiritual modalities. He blends modern biometric data analysis with deep intuitive work, meeting his clients exactly where they are on their healing journeys. Roland is an educator for master supplements and U.S. enzymes, and he has led some fascinating studies on HRV, which is heart rate variability, in conjunction with the EESystem, which you all know is a huge piece of my personal healing and what I believe everyone should experience. And so he's done this, and it's all about exploring how subtle energy technologies influence human biology. And so I'm completely impressed and beyond honored to dive into this conversation with Roland today to explore the future of personalized wellness, consciousness based healing, and what it really means to reclaim our health from the inside out. That's the last time I'll be reading from a piece of paper in this conversation. Roland, you are so like it's amazing everything that you do. I'm thrilled to have you on the It's All Good show.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. And that you weren't kidding. You did really knock that out of the park. I could not have held a candle to that introduction. So thank you. I might steal a couple things if I need to send someone a bio in the future.
I'll send this to you. It's all yours.
Thank you.
Um, we met. I mean, unofficially, we met a couple years ago. We realized in Dallas at the Changing Lives, Changing Destiny. But we met officially recently on a Zoom call for EESystem owners, and the conversation revolved around some work you were doing, or you have been doing, ongoing, I guess, with EESystem. And I want to get to that, but I don't want to get to that right away. I want to dive into just give us kind of an initial idea of what it's all about for you. I mean, your approach is truly integrative, blending science, intuition, and energy work. How did this holistic model evolve for you over the years?
I want to call it happy accident mixed with some intuitive knowing that I didn't question. So the journey actually began in a very left-brained operating mode. Meaning, what I mean by that is, as I was taught to be, was logical. Everything was about science. It had to be empirical. It had to be rational. It couldn't be questioned. And that was the greatest catalyst for me to actually open up the right brain side of my intuition and the opportunity to be a more holistic, integrated practitioner. I started with exercise, and from there I realized, man, everyone I see has something going on with their health. And when you use movement as a catalyst, you can really move the needle in other aspects of their life. But as I progressed through exercise, I hit a wall. There was a boredom there, in the sense that I didn't just want to do this by itself for the rest of my life. So my girlfriend at the time said to me, "Well, why don't you become a nutritionist? Everyone asks you about diet advice anyways." And I just remember standing in my kitchen, pausing, holding the phone, saying, "That's really good idea." So in classic Roland fashion, I don't really plan too much. There was an open house for a privatized nutrition school where I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I went and I got the last appointment of the day to meet the advisors. Little did I know that the advisor I met was the owner of the school. Her husband became a client of mine in the gym I was working at the time entirely by happenstance. He had no idea I was going to the school. So then I got to know the family. And then as I was in school, the owner, she was wonderful. Her name was Elizabeth. She ran up to me in the hallway one day and said, "Roland, come here. I know the class you're going to teach for me when you're graduated." And I went, "I'm not the best student. You want me to teach a class?" And she just took off running down the hall. It was the weirdest scene, but I was left standing there going, I guess I'm teaching. And that really made me have to step everything up because I didn't get a tutelage in how to teach a course. I had to go through the notes. I had to understand all the aspects of how the body worked, symptomatology management, causes of diseases, various things that were presented through the perspective of the school. And then as I was teaching, I'm like, man, if there were only a way I could run tests on people, then I could take their symptoms and then match them against what the test said, and I can get better information. And this was in the early days of functional medicine. So then I realized functional medicine was a thing in the US, not really in Canada. So I started studying that, got connected with a mentor who was an allopathic physician. So I learned the illness model and perspective, but with a more functional, holistic approach to dealing with it, which is a nice halfway house. We can talk about functional medicine in some capacities if you want, but I knew that wasn't enough. Fast forward after COVID, I'd spent a lot of time working with pro athletes, and I knew that there was more to it because I'd studied a lot of things spiritual based myself. For a while, I was a psychedelic shaman. I did guidances for ayahuasca, MDMA, and mushroom journeys. So that cracked my reality open, going, wow, there's so much more to this than the illusion that we actually live, that we all take as real. It's just a dimensional aspect of experience. So when I was made aware of a gentleman who actually Dr. Sandra has known for the better part of, oh, I don't know, 30 years, because they've kind of come up together. They're about the same age. He's the foremost expert in heart rate variability clinically in the US. He's probably read tens of thousands of HRV analyses. I got the opportunity to meet him and I just blurted it out, not even thinking about it. "Can I mentor with you?" And I almost felt bad. I'm like, that's very presumptuous of me. He's like, "Shit, yeah, why not?" So we went for it. I said, "When I come to the US, I'm going to come spend some time with you." And I've been working on and off with him over the last 5 years. But through this process and some of my own healing, I was put in touch with meditation teachers, shamanic practitioners, psychospiritual practitioners, and everyone who I've learned from became a teacher and they've become a mentor. And then I've gone on the route of saying, okay, I've taken all of this stuff from what I call physical to non-physical. Not many people look at it this way, or if they do, they don't talk about it because A, it's a lot to talk about, B, it's an incredibly um, complicated undertaking to try to make sense of this and put it into language and a concept that people can understand and latch onto. And then C, you have to take all of this generalistic stuff and, as you said, apply it to the person, the who they think they are, the stories they carry, the direction in life they're taking, the where they want to go, and you have to make it personalized to them. So that's really the background story of what's gotten me to where I am today. And it's at the core of it is just it's never enough. There's always more. There's more to learn. There's more to be able to teach and develop and do. So that's really my passion and my journey. I just want to help people, and the happy side effect is I get to have fun while I'm doing it.
I absolutely love this. Now, I knew you were going to be beyond fascinating to have a conversation with. There was a piece here that you just brought up that I had no idea about, and that is the little foray into holding space, psychedelics, and this and that. I have a separate podcast called Psychedelics as Medicine, which you may not be aware of. And so
I was not.
this is like there's so many things pinging right here, and I just I knew in that Zoom call that it was going to be a really good thing. So I'm tickled how the universe brings us together, and we get to have these experiences. Now, one of the things is that you emphasize addressing um, what your clients are ready for. How do you assess that readiness? How does that all fit together?
That is a great question because I've often pondered that prior to meeting someone. And the funny answer is the less time I spend assessing the readiness, the more the obvious nature of the readiness comes to me spontaneously in the moment. But I really do have to consider a few things. Number one, what are they dealing with? And of those four categories that I try to look through, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, what are the representations of how that thing that's in their life, be it a physical challenge, a life challenge, whatever you want to call it, how is it manifesting through those lenses I'm able to tap into? Then the third thing is where is their degree of openness? I've worked with a lot of pro athletes and I've seen an incredible amount of psycho-emotional neuroses in their realities, but they need to be the warriors, right? They need to live the illusion of letting the ego guide them, or else there's no point in competition and trying to beat someone else for the sake of winning a game or winning a championship. So it depends upon where their openness is and also what they're asking me to help them through. If someone is helping or asking me to help them through a physical issue, a body biochemical based issue, and I know there's an old trauma or there's a belief system that's challenging their ability to clear that thing, but they're not ready to deal with that, I try to support them on the physical side and then slowly wait for them to open to something bigger. If someone's already beyond that and they want to go into the world of, psycho spiritual stuff, I did this with a client yesterday, is we had to clear something from his reality. So through conversation, the dynamic of me interacting with them brings the thing up that I need to tap into that they have to tell me that I'm getting correctly. They have to validate it because I can't make it up. I don't want to tell someone there's a problem that's not there. But if they then validate what I'm tapping into seems appropriate and it feels authentic in their reality, then we do something to clear that thing with me posing them a question that they have to say yes or no to. And once they've given permission, I can do my work. So it's always to the free will of the person I'm working with. So it's a very long way of saying I start with a physical because everyone can feel this, they can latch on to this. If your gut hurts, you want to deal with your gut pain. But if someone's ready to realize that their gut pain might be coming from an old trauma that they're carrying with them as a program in their reality for the last 25 years, that person will go after that. If it's someone who has some gut pain, maybe we'll start with some digestive enzymes, some probiotics, and some breathing. Again, it's personalized to the person.
I really yes, so much yes in everything that you're saying. Um, all right, so can you walk us through how you use biometric data to understand someone's patterns?
Absolutely. So, working with people, you have to know when you're talking to the person and you're talking to the personality, there's always a bias of subjective worldview, their personal opinion of how they see things and how they see the world. So, when you're listening to their symptoms, if you just take that as the entirety of the information you need to gather to figure out where to go, if that person cannot articulate correctly, if they don't understand how to properly explain something, you might be missing a massive piece of information that you need. The biometrics in the data allow me to talk to the body bypassing the person. Does that make sense?
Right.
If I look at the HRV, for example, and I see there's a certain pattern of how the heart rhythm is being maintained, and I can then say to someone, do you, like, when you stand up, do you feel a little anxious and agitated? Or when you lie down, do you feel like you want to crash? I can start assessing patterns from how that person is regulating themselves unconsciously based upon how their autonomic nervous system is currently operating that day. If I do a bioimpedance scan and I see someone who has low bone mineral content or they have high quantities of water outside versus inside the cell, I'm like, are you thirsty all the time? Or if I see some aspects of downregulation of thyroid function or whatever, I can ask questions that corroborate what the data is telling me, then I can build a more robust case. Because you also have to know, and this is one thing that I've learned from my mentor, and I've put my own spin on it. As practitioners, you always have a desire for where your client is to go in your care, right? You always want something for them to some degree, or else you wouldn't want to take on helping them. But you have to understand that everyone's ready for what their physiology is able to withstand from a perspective of intervention and stress. So you might want to go do some deep psychospiritual work with someone and heal some horrible PTSD. But if their nervous system is barely hanging on, you start with making that person physically strong. You give them water, you give them minerals, you nourish their body so their physiology can build its wells of energy reserves up to deal with the heavy stuff. So you have to use the biometric data as a guide to know what needs to be addressed as a pattern in the physical body and how ready they are for the, I guess, the light or the deep work, depending upon how healthy they are. Because a lot of people, especially in the spiritual circles, they push people into potentially pretty dark areas, not knowing the interrelation between how the body's going to respond to reliving old stress patterns or to having them have to bring up old stories that they've not cleared, that to them they're still active in their field. That will put the body into a fight flight response. And although it may be the thing that they need to do, it might not be the time to do it because that person isn't ready for that yet. That's what I use biometrics for, to figure out who they are beyond the story they tell me. It's my little secret. Now everyone knows.
I love it.
I get around the ego with the biometrics to some degree, but it gives me objective information of how fragile versus how robust is this person.
So, do I have to come to Georgia to have this experience with you in person, or can you do some of this remotely? How does that work?
The only stuff I can do remotely is the energetic work because obviously being entangled of the way we all are, I don't need to be physically next to someone to tap into something. But to gather data, yes. Either you need to come here or I need to go somewhere because I need my devices. Everything is connected to a computer. And I need the person's body there because the information coming through the body is what I need to assess in order to do this properly.
Okay, makes sense.
Looks like you're coming on the road.
I know. I'm like, Georgia. That sounds
South Georgia
good.
is a beautiful place in the summertime, hot but beautiful.
I like it. Um, so give us an idea. What role do you see bioenergetic medicine playing in the future of healthcare?
I want to say bioenergetic medicine is the lost past of our future coming back. You know, but before the days of modern biochemistry and diagnostics to assess biochemistry, a lot of what was used was the basic principles of physics applied to understanding how the body was regulating itself. You know, if you look at an electronic acupuncture device, for example, you know what one of those are?
Yes.
They were created in the early 1900s, and what they would do was they would look at how the meridian flow was being regulated in the body. You look at the pattern of that regulation of flow, and you see where the disturbances are, either the inflammations, the upregulated current, or the degradations, the degeneration, the downregulation. And rather than try to reverse engineer the chemistry, which is incredibly complicated because there's no one pathology that has the exact same replication in every person who manifests a disease, they would just look to balance out current of flow. They would look at a remedy that had the signature that the body was missing. So the restoration of that remedy would figure out how to activate the body's self-healing. And I think bioenergetic medicine and biophysics are really the interplay between clinical action and the ability to generate self-healing in the body. Same with the psychological and the emotional and the spiritual stuff. It's all that person and the illusion of their experience. And I don't say illusion in a negative way, saying they don't know what they're experiencing, but it's a separation from oneness that creates the illusion of being sick because they are not one with themselves in some capacity. So I think that aspect of health is going to be the future because what biochemistry does really well is it explains a lot in deep detail. But if we look at the hierarchy of science, physics tells chemistry what to do, chemistry tells biology what to do. So if we're in biochemistry, we're in the middle of the road. We're trying to follow mechanisms and play one off of another, but we're not realizing that the thing that's directing all of those biochemical reactions of enzymes and chemical chemistry going on is the physics that underpins it all based upon charge, right? It's all about energy at the end of the day. So bioenergetic medicine is trying to get to that fundamental crux. And there's, again, many ways to do it, but I think that is the future because health tries to learn about disease. Sorry, medicine tries to learn about health by studying disease. It doesn't make any sense to me. You will never learn how to make someone healthy if you know every single mechanism that goes on in type 2 diabetes, because type 2 diabetes is a conscious decision by the body. The restoration of it, which is based upon the intervention, is just going to get the body back to a state of health where diabetes is no more. So your deep knowledge of type 2 diabetes is irrelevant in a healthy person. The only thing you learn is to manage the symptom with either pharmacology or supplements, nutraceuticals, but the core is a much deeper fundamental problem that no one looks at.
Fascinating. Now, tell me, before we talk about the studies with EESystem, what was your first introduction to EESystem?
My first introduction was actually my wife becoming aware of it. And I saw a video about the system and I didn't know what to make of it. I was curious, I was skeptical, I was many things. And this is when I was on vacation in Florida, figuring out where I wanted to move when I left Canada initially. So what I did was I just took action and I got connected with a guy named Jim Trider. I don't know if you know that name.
I know Jim.
Um, so this was 3 years ago. I just called Jim up because he was the only person who had some semblance of an EE system or knowledge about it in the local area that I was in. I drove down to Sarasota and I had lunch with him, and he just started telling me about all the things that were happening, and I was just so confused. Like, how does this work? This was early days of bioenergetic medicine for me in some capacity, so I was a little less open-minded then as I am now. And then from there, I actually realized there was a system up in Tarpon Springs, and I just went for my first session. And then at one point, Sandra came to that system, and I asked a question at the end of her talk in the Q&A segment. And I asked, has anyone ever done any before and after heart rate variability assessment to see what's going on with someone in the system? And she said, no, well, why don't you maybe do it here? And I did, but she had no idea I did because I did it for my own curiosity. I'm like, I'll spend an afternoon testing people. I really want to know what's going on here. So that's how I was made aware of the EE system. And from there, it was just a very natural progression where maybe 3, 4 months ago, May reached out to me. And because I'm not really anywhere on social media, but she found me on Facebook. I have a very small Facebook account. And she said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing another study?" And I went, "Absolutely, I would." And here we are.
So tell us about the studies. What did you find? What notable information came out of it?
Yeah, sure. So I'll set up the premise of how I did a study. So one of my biometrics, my main biometric is what I call a clinically valid heart rate variability assessment. Now I want to delineate something. HRV is not one thing, and most people wear an Oura ring nowadays or a Whoop, some sort of wearable device, and it gives you an HRV reading. That's what's called associative HRV. It's not clinically acceptable HRV because it's looking at your pulse. It's actually measuring the rhythm of the pulse and it runs it through its own proprietary algorithm. That's why if you wear an Oura ring and a Whoop, you'll get two different HRV readings, but they might correlate. They might be similar and somewhat valid. I use a chest strap, a polar H10 belt. You put it across the chest because it's probably the most complicated technical stuff of the whole interview. Heart rate variability is the time difference between each individual heartbeat. So what's important to know is the heart's not supposed to be a metronome. You're a music guy, right? Keeping time in music is amazing for keeping everything in time so the song sounds coherent. Coherence in the heart is actually having a subtle difference of how much time goes between each individual beat because that's a good representation of a healthy autonomic nervous system. So when I'm measuring my HRV, I'm using a chest strap because I'm measuring the frequencies that are coming off of the heart. High frequency is your parasympathetic. which is your rest, recover, and digest. Low frequency is your sympathetic, which is more of your fight or flight. But even that explanation isn't good because it makes the sympathetic system sound like it's bad and negative. It is not. Every time you breathe in, it's a sympathetically mediated response. Every time you breathe out, it's a parasympathetically mediated response. What you want is to be able to have both sides of the teeter-totter equally showing up at the appropriate time you want them to show up. If you're going to hike that mountain behind you, that's a very sympathetically driven endeavor. You're going to go up a steep hill, you're going to exert your body, you're going to use your muscles, your heart rate's going to go up, there's probably less oxygen there. That's an appropriate stress that you want your body to be able to adapt to, or else you wouldn't be able to get up the hill. When you come back down and you're sleeping for the next 2 days because you're so exhausted, that's the parasympathetic system counter-regulatorily trying to push you into a recovery state to deal with the stress from the climb. So it's really the yin and yang to make it a little cliche. So when I'm measuring people before they go in the EE system, I'm looking at this relationship, right? My definition of health is energy, optimal health is energy plus adaptability. So if someone has a high amount of energy and a high amount of adaptability, they have a powerful autonomic nervous system. They have a really good regulation state. If someone is chronically ill, they typically have no variance of their autonomic nervous system. They're stuck in the hyper fight or flight response. Their body's locked in inflammation, and it may be they're normal, so they're not aware of it, but that's the opposite of being healthy, is it's all there through the nervous system. So that's what I'm measuring in people before they go in the system and when they come out to see how the patterns change if they do.
And what did you find?
So far, each individual had a unique response, which is, of course, there's no absolute sameness across the heterogeneity that is the human race. But there are trends and patterns that I did notice in terms of things that were common across most people. So the base thing that I get is this thing called fitness score. And fitness score is a measure of that energy and adaptability along an axis. Almost everyone had a bump in their overall fitness scores after the 3 nights they spent in the system, meaning to some degree that their body has the ability to increase its overall vitality because something inside the physiology has shifted for the better. Most people that I tested, and this might not shock you, were on the more stress side of healthy. Generally speaking, a lot of people who find the EE system do so because they're out of options as to what to do for their health. So starting there, there's a few caveats that if someone is in a deep state of chronic crisis, however old they are is how long it took them to get there. So if they're 45, 55 years old and they're diseased, there's only going to be so much that can be done in a short period of time, given how much energy the body can actually soak up and re-regulate. So I did see that in some cases, um, almost everyone had a down regulation of their fight or flight response. There was more of a down regulation of the fight or flight response than there was an equal amount of upregulation of the rest or digest response. And I think I can explain why I think this happens afterwards. So the things that were common patterns is overall fitness score went up and a down regulation of the fight or flight response combined with a slightly more subtle increase of the parasympathetic, the rest and digest response. Because ideally, if someone's super high sympathetic, low on the sympathetic scale, you want one to come down as the other goes up to find a little bit more of an equilibrium within the physiology. So that's what I did see for the most part. And then some people, very few, but a couple people actually had a little bit of a regression, but was interesting because one of those persons, those people, actually looked at re-trigger some sort of viral response in their system. I noticed herpes simplex, a cold sore, came through after being in the system for a couple days, which makes sense. If the body's sequestering away old infections and there's a medium, a catalyst, if you will, of being able to upregulate energy in the body via the immune system, sometimes to heal, you have to go through painful stuff to push it out of your physiology as you get back to a better state of homeostasis.
That's interesting because there are reports. I follow so many stories, and I've met so many owners of EE System centers, and there are reports of people getting feeling a bit worse after they have the experience, and
Mhm.
it makes sense based on what you just said.
People commonly don't understand, excuse me, the process or the path of how the body heals. The body doesn't know disease. The body only knows to maintain itself in the state that it's in and always try to heal any sort of injury. And you know, the doctor, his name's Zach Bush.
Yes.
He has a really nice way of putting it that I really like. I'm going to steal one of his lines. He says, "We get sick when our rate of injury exceeds our rate of repair." It's a pretty simple model. Health is not complicated. Disease is incredibly complicated. So people always assume that a negative symptom, the experience of something that doesn't feel good, means negative. But if you've ever had a stomach flu, to heal, you need to basically poop and vomit your brains out so your body can vacate whatever infection has inhabited your gastrointestinal system. And then after you've cleared it, the body takes a couple days in terms of coming back to its new normal or its baseline, if you will. So if someone has some sort of viral fungal infection or a parasitic infection in their system, if they do something to try to rid themselves of that, they can feel a lot worse temporarily before they feel better because the die-off inside of their body is what's called a Herxheimer's reaction. You're waging war of an organismic entity inside of you, and your immune system and whatever you're doing, the herbs you're taking, the antifungals, the system that you're sitting in, whatever's giving your body enough energy reserves to fight that off is going to make you feel pretty crappy if you're detoxifying environmental compounds, heavy metals, anything that's embedded itself in the body has to mobilize it from storage. It has to liberate and transport those molecules to somewhere in the body that have to be processed, liver, kidneys, lungs, skin, gastrointestinal system. And then it has to remove those things in the process. And while it's doing so, there are, shall we call it, metabolites and things that are being released from these toxins that might actually nauseate someone or make them feel like they have a headache or brain fog or low mood or mood irregularities. Emotional swings happen when people are doing things like detoxes and healing. In the same way, you know, in the spiritual world, you know that if you clear something big, you might fall into a depressive funk for a day or two. When you're clearing something from your physiology, the body will mirror the same patterns because the body consciousness is telling you where it is. We just don't listen to our bodies. When we get headaches, we take a painkiller. When we, you know, roll an ankle, we take an anti-inflammatory. We get on with our days. If people only knew that they had to lean into that process to allow it to happen so it can move through, and then on the other side of that is the thing that you really desire, the greater health, the ability to feel much better and free of the thing that's compromising you, changing your relationship with negative actually helps speed up the healing process, providing it's a short-term thing and it's not a new problem that's forming.
Okay. Now, I'm kind of known as the proof is in the pudding guy. I'm not a science guy. When I had my back-to-back strokes in 2020, Dr. Sandra reached out to me, said, "Get yourself to Las Vegas. We've got a system here in our home, and because there weren't many public systems, and we'll get you back on track. We'll get you back out on tour." And at that time, I was in a wheelchair, barely able to manage a walker. I spent 2 hours in her 16 unit, and I was able to walk unassisted. I mean, that's how quickly, and that's why I say that for me was like, I have no idea what's going on here, but the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding's walking again. Tell me you were in Tarpon Springs. That's a 48 unit. My dear friend owns that
Kara.
system.
Yeah. It was a
Really good.
24 at the time.
Was it
I didn't
24?
see it when it was a 48, but I've been to a
Okay.
48 in Vegas.
So talk to me about what your personal experience has been in the system. I mean, I look at you, you look healthy, this, that, and the other, but what is your kind of your own personal experience with the EE system?
Yeah, I've had a few, and it's interesting that as I have evolved my consciousness inside of my human experience, my experiences with the systems changed, which I find again, that's an N equals one. That's a Roland thing in terms of how I would define that. The first few times I did it, the thing that I noticed most was this deep state of relaxation that I had not been able to replicate anywhere else, even lying on a beach or lying outside on the grass grounding. And I remember one time my wife and I did a 4 hour, and then we went to a grocery store afterwards, and we're both just walking around aimlessly, trying to function, going, what's like, do you feel this too? So the initial stages for me were this incredible deep relaxation, and the more I went, the more I started to travel inwards. Because as much as I'm a scientifically minded guy, I'm really all about exploration, like you say. I want to go do things and see what my personal experience is because no one can experience anything outside of themselves. So the more time I've gone in, I have had incredibly deep meditations where I was in medieval times climbing an old tower. I was looking down at my feet. I was wearing different stuff, and I came out of it going, "Oh my God." I was climbing up concrete steps in what felt like the 1400s. Another time I slept in the system overnight up in Tarpon, and I had a conversation with my higher self for about an hour. And I had so much given to me in terms of insights, but it was given in a way that I couldn't take it all with me when I woke up. So it just kind of evaporated. But I'm sure some of the things, and I know some of the things that were seated then have taken hold now, kind of like little clues to where things are going, how things are going to evolve inside of you based upon how you see yourself in the world. Um, and I said recently I slept in one in the Poconos, which is a 24 unit system overnight, and I have a metal plate in my left ankle. I thought it would be a good idea to learn how to do backflips at age 26, and that didn't go well. So this ankle has always given me grief when it comes to doing anything athletic because I used to be a very, very high level athlete in competitive martial arts when I was younger in track and field mostly, but um, things that were hard on the body. So this ankle often throbs. And I slept in the system for 2 nights, and I was not on a comfortable bed by any stretch, but I had none of that physical pain after a couple days that I do sometimes wake up with, having been hard on myself for almost 40 years of life. So my own experiences, there's been a mix of like learning to tap into that relax. There's been the inner journey to outer space, if you will, that deep exploration that comes from being able to sit and really meditate in the system. And there's also been some physiologic shifts of, again, body pain and probably some clarity of some various things in my upper body that I've dealt with in terms of I had Lyme before. I've had an issue with strep infections when I was a kid. So I've been working on those things for a few years clinically. All those things seem to have been positively affected by my time in there. But I also have no resistances. I do not, there's no skepticism in me in terms of, is this doing something really? Am I actually getting benefit? Is this all like I just go in and I align with a frequency. I believe it's a field of coherence. I open myself to the healing that it provides. I welcome it in, and whatever happens, happens. I'm not going in with some sort of like conditional outcome, like, oh, you better do this for me. The body will always do what the body's ready for. I can't tell my body what to do and what it wants to do. It knows better than I. My mind will never tell my body something more than the physiology knows itself.
I so appreciate you answering the question and um, giving us that insight, and it was exactly what I was looking for. Now, on to a little bit different of an area. From your perspective as a educator for master supplements and US enzymes, what are some of the most misunderstood patterns you see in health and illness?
That's a really, really good question. Let me think about a few of them. One that comes up immediately is thyroid issues. Why I say thyroid issues, again, I think we have this polarized understanding or perspective of things within the body because oftentimes the medical industry will think the body is making a mistake. The body is slowing the thyroid down consciously, and therefore we have to boost the thyroid. We need to put in all these hormones. We need to put in all the thyroid supplements. We need to do all these things. And the one commonality I see on a physical side of things, when someone has hypothyroidism, they have a nervous system disorder mixed with a gastrointestinal disruption, mixed with some sort of immune dysregulation. And the thyroid, which is like the thermostat of the body, is being artificially slowed down so the physiology preserves itself. Because if imagine this, you imagine you crank up your furnace, but there's not enough heat coming out of the furnace. All you do is you short out the motor. So then all of a sudden you have no furnace, right? And then you're in the cold in Idaho in the winter. That would be terrible. So what people are trying to do is they're trying to override a conscious decision by the body that gives you some degree of experiential short-term to mid-term benefit. But if you don't deal with the thing that's causing the issue in the first place, then you're never going to resolve the thyroid because the thyroid in this scenario is the sacrificial lamb, but likely not the core issue. And then in that, every disease state, I believe, this is my belief, so please don't make this universal law. Every disease state has a non-physical correlate. For example, if we go back to thyroid and Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid disorder, everyone that I've ever worked with who has Hashimoto's has a hard time expressing themselves through clear communication, or they don't necessarily have the ability to listen over hearing because they're not the same thing. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
what's at the center of every chakra is an organ. So if we're talking thyroid, that's the throat. If you can't communicate and express at that energy center, the yang projection of that is speaking, the yin is the receiving, the listening. So it's just things that I notice with people. Everyone who has a cardiovascular issue, well, that's a heart issue. What's the relationship problem in their reality? So there's a lot of things that are non-physical aspects of health that people have been conditioned to not think about because it's not been promoted or popularized. But the vast majority of things that I think, to answer your question, that are misrepresented or misunderstood is we think the symptom that presents itself is the area of problem. The symptom that presents itself is the body's best choice of a compromised state to deal with dysfunctional physiology, dysfunctional psychology, dysfunctional emotion, and some sort of spiritual crises, being it not connected to self, not connected to something higher, not connected to community, not connected to love. So that's really what I think we're missing in health is perspective.
Now let me ask how, and we kind of you touched on this a little bit earlier, but now we'll bring it into a little more clarity. Like, what percentage of your clients are really willing to go from I'm addressing this physical aspect of what's going on with me, and then they're ready to address it from the psychological, spiritual, or other emotional?
You know what's a hilarious response to that question? Because I've contemplated this very recently. It's amazing you asked that. The degree of resistance I have in believing people are ready for things beyond the physical dictates the kind of clients that come to me. Does that make sense? If I have
Yes.
resistances because I've decided that someone might not be open, so if I allow fear to come in to potentially close off an opportunity for this person, then either that person is going to stay where I think potentially they should be, might want to be, or I will get more people who are not as open to these things because of certain belief sets in their realities that have constructed the person who shows up in front of me. The more I lean into being entirely open to the all, I get people who don't have resistances to those things, or I get people who've never gone into the psychospiritual world but they're totally open to doing something in that world because I'm not making it seem too woo-woo for their belief set.
That's a great answer. I do a lot of talk therapy work with people, and they come to me with, "Oh, this is what's happening for me physically," and I immediately move into the emotional body, and it's fascinating to me who's ready to take that ball and run with it and who isn't. And it's like I just put it out there. I don't hold back, but directly related to what you were saying just there. It's I'm incredibly pleased that we've had the opportunity to meet. I know this is not going to be the end of our interaction um, by any means at all. Uh, we've covered a lot of bases here, and is there anything we're leaving out? Is there anything that I haven't asked and brought to the surface for us to discuss that you'd like to kind of throw out there as we're nearing the end of our conversation?
I mean, I think we've had a pretty rounded conversation this go around. I'm sure if we had a different approach and a different topic set, we could pull out a bunch of other things. But I think today's been a really nice cohesive flow into things. We've touched on my story, the background. We've touched on things with the EE system, biometrics, philosophical approaches to, I guess, healing and client care. I would say the same to you. Anything else that you wanted to maybe touch on, bring in before we round this one out formally?
I I think it's gone in the perfect direction, and it feels like um I knew it was going to be good. I didn't know it was going to be this good. I didn't know
I
that it was
appreciate
going
that.
to be
Thank you.
this well rounded, and I'm it has nothing to do with me. I'm impressed with this conversation we've had, and so I think this is probably a good point to end. Now you'll give me information on how people can find you and everything like that, and wherever this is
Yes.
posted, we'll include that. Are there further studies planned with EE system?
Nothing at this current moment formally, but I believe there will be. It's like you said, there's that philosophical split between proof is in the pudding versus I want to know what it does and how it works. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day because he's a very rational, empirical, evidence-based guy. And when it comes to figuring out how something like that, and this is for all of energy technology, this can be said, but to lesser degrees of complexity with other t pieces of tech because of obviously what the EE system comprises. You can't measure the effect of an energy field and how that energy field affects all things in the human body. It's impossible. You cannot look at the blood, you cannot look at the saliva, at the urine, at the stool at the same time as you're looking at the HRV, you're looking at conductivity within a cell, you're looking at someone's psycho-emotional state via a questionnaire. You're only looking at aspects of what you can measure as a before and an after. So why I'm saying this is a lot of people want actual evidence and proof of exactly what happens, entirely complete in its thought, without ever misstepping anything that could be misrepresented. We don't have the diagnostics that currently exist that can do that. We don't. And the irony is in the medical system, almost all of the diagnostic tools they use are energy tools, an MRI, an EEG, and EKG. They're measuring energetic signatures that are then translated into some sort of visual representation of a diagnostic. But even they don't have all the tools to measure all the different variables that happen when your physiology and field of energy interact with an external energy wave that is passing through your own. And that's why I say to people, you can be skeptical, you can be all these things, just go try it. Like nothing bad is going to happen to you. Even if you're the most closed off person, you'll probably walk out of there feeling pretty good. And that's what, I think it's important to know because a lot of system owners, they might not be medical or health based in their background. And I'm sure they have a lot of people coming in grilling them with all kinds of specific questions, half of which these people don't understand, half of the questions they're asking, but you can't know all before it's knowable. And we, as our current level of consciousness with science, don't have the diagnostics that can detect all the things that are happening and explain them objectively without any infallible doubt. So I just think that's the last thing. When it comes to this nouveau way of where health is going, you asked this in the beginning. If energy medicine is the future, things that work usually have a 3 to 5 decade time lag until they're able to be explained in the aftermath of how they worked. So if you're open and you allow healing into your life, sometimes you just have to trust your gut or trust the guidance of whatever has brought this into your world. And that's true for that which you align with, and that maybe that you're doing that you don't trust either. Because, pharmaceuticals and fear is never going to save anyone or help them get healthier. So I'll let people extrapolate from that from what they will. But that's my only parting piece is if you're skeptical, that's fine. Maintain your skepticism, but just have a degree of openness. Because if you close off anything, you'll absolutely shut down any potential opportunity that may want to come into your life that can catalyze some incredible change. But again,
I
that's my
do.
opinion. I don't have any more what's the word I'm looking for? Credibility in your life than you do. It's all you.
Right. And that's a good reminder for people. Roland, I want to thank you so much. I have so much appreciation for your perspective, for the work that you're doing out there, and what I know is a very high ability to affect people's lives that, of course, are open to it, and that's the people that find their way to you. And so, thank you so much. I look forward to future conversations with you. And more than any of that, I look forward to actually being in your presence once again and spending some time, whether it's personally or professionally or a combination of both. Thank you so much for being a guest on the It's All Good show.
Likewise, Dr. Dream. Thank you again for having me.